Howdy, folks. Happy Wednesday. Peter's in Winnipeg. I'm in rainy Buffalo, and Russ is somewhere like 50 miles outside of Boston because the hotels.
It's not 50, and it's raining here too. It's nasty weather, man.
Well, you'll be overjoyed to hear this, Russ. We're expected in Buffalo to get the remnants of these Midwest storms that
Oh,
are
wow.
coming just in time for you to come to Buffalo for the draft combine.
Luckily, I brought a jacket because I really thought it would be like summertime. What did I know?
Yeah, June in Buffalo. Come on. Do you have any pre-show stuff, or you want to go right into it?
No, go right into it.
Okay. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Wednesday, May 29th, 2019.
I'm Peter Tessier, and it's not just balmy Winnipeg. It's going to be sweaty Winnipeg today.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology. I'll be wearing a jacket.
And I'm Michael Lagello, and this is the 26th anniversary of Wayne Gretzky's hat trick in Game 7 against the Maple Leafs in 1993.
Oh.
And I hate you, Wayne Gretzky. And this is the HockeyBuzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. Very smooth transition. Okay, we'll talk about Game 2 of the Stanley Cup Final, which the Leafs were prevented from going to because of Wayne Gretzky. The Boston Bruins with a rather decisive victory in Game 1 at TD Garden on Monday, Russ. Game 2, I mean, you can always say that a team is not out of it until they've lost on home ice, but I get the feeling here that if Boston dominates again tonight and goes up 2-0, St. Louis will put in a great effort at home, but I think they really, if they have aims to win this series, I think they have to win tonight. What do you think?
Yeah, I think they do have to win tonight. They probably did come into this thinking they'd get a split. They've got to do it. Berube's got to step up a little bit on his game. Players like Parayko have to step up their games. Tarasenko. They've got to, start out the game like they did last time, but finish it much better.
Yeah.
And the only way they're going to do that is not going into the penalty box. And Berube swears it won't happen again. It's not like them. But I think that's easier said than done when you've got like a pesky group like the Bruins are, and you've got a juiced crowd, and it's probably going to be a tight game, and emotions take over. It's very hard to sort of stay neutral.
Now,
Yeah,
Peter,
they've got to be a little smarter in the middle frame. They had Boston where they wanted them, and then they got sloppy. They got a little relaxed.
Yep.
And that's the learning curve. Boston's been there before. They've got a good history in terms of the players on that roster. They've got and not just from a Stanley Cup final, but also from playoff experience. The Blues, there's experience there, but it's not as well rounded as the Bruins. And you've got to understand that the hardest part of the game is not just closing it out, but it's getting to the point that you can close it out. And that's what they missed in Game 1.
Yeah, now you have the unique perspective of watching that team for 6 games against the Jets. And the one thing that I thought was missing in Game 1, and Brian Burke pointed this out yesterday on Hockey Central, was that the Blues were a physically punishing team, not only against Winnipeg, but against San Jose most vividly, because Carlson was out, Pavelski was out, Hurdle was out. They laid the body. They were very physical in that series, and I thought that they matched up well against the Bruins in a sense because they could play that physical game. And really, other than a few hits against Bergeron, there wasn't a great amount of physicality from the Blues. And I know what Burke said. Burke basically said, if you're going to take 5 minor penalties and you're going to lose the game, you may as well make the Bruins pay and have them pay a physical toll. Because I know from the Toronto series, Peter, Krug was banged up against the Leafs, and nobody's 100% right now. But I mean, don't you think that St. Louis has to get back to that physical game if they have a chance to beat the Bruins?
Yeah, they've got to go in hard. They've got to pressure them. And what they've got to do is what they did to the other teams they played is they've got to take away time and space in the defensive zone for the Bruins. They can't let them get up. They got to disrupt the breakout, and they've got to put pressure around the net like they did against the Jets.
Right.
And make it difficult for the Bruins skilled players to get momentum and move the puck.
Yeah.
They've done it really well this postseason. They've got to find a way to get that going against the Bruins. The Bruins are just a very disciplined team when it comes to stuff like that, and they sort of have a wild card, variable in them in some of the way they play, in particular with Brad Marchand, and that keeps teams on their toes. It's going to be difficult for the Blues to do that, but they've got guys like O'Reilly have to start using their body and making a mess of things down low on the Bruins.
O'Reilly, Maroon,
Maroon in particular too.
Yeah, Maroon really was invisible.
Yeah, until late in the game, until late in the third period. Then he started. I think it was a level of frustration at that point. But he's got to sort of be that bull in a china shop type of player. And if he is, that'll be tough for him to control, because the Bruins are not on the blue line. They're big with Chara and Carlo, but up front they're not exactly a big and imposing team, Russ.
No, I mean they have guys, Coyle and such, but no. The interesting thing is, if you're the Blues, you can't worry about let's lay the first hit, let's lay them out in front of the home crowd. You can't do it, because if you do that, they're going to goad you into the penalty box again early on. It's going to happen. So maybe there is a hit at some point in the first period when the opportunity arises, where they know that the player knows, all right, this is a good opportunity, but don't try and do it in the first 30 seconds just to prove a point. I think that would be bad too.
Now, this is a bit of bad news for the Blues, and it hasn't been confirmed yet, but Jeremy Rutherford of The Athletic is reporting that Robert Thomas may not play in Game 2. Now, Thomas was part of that number 3 line with Bozak and Maroon that really played well against San Jose, provided a bunch of matchup problems against the Sharks. I'm not sure who they'd move up. Maybe Alex Steen, maybe they'd move him up to the third line. But, Thomas has played pretty well for them, Russ.
Yeah, he has. And yesterday, Berube acted like he's going to play. So I don't know what to believe at this point, because we're in the Stanley Cup. He didn't play after the hit. We didn't hear that he went in concussion protocol. So, I don't want to, like on another show, use whatever phraseology you want, but maybe he was just sort of, banged up, and maybe he did go through concussion protocol, and maybe he didn't pass it for that game, or it was on the edge and they were, thought better of not playing him. Maybe it's going to be, let's see what he's like after he wakes up and he, gets out there for the pregame skate. Mm-hmm. They'll probably throw him out there and just see how he feels, unless he feels that bad this morning. So there's really no way of knowing. But it's a loss. And if they don't have him out there, that's another smart, good skating, youthful pair of legs that they could use.
Right, and we talked about Vince Dunn yesterday. It sounds like he may get back in wearing a cane.
I still am skeptical about that. Okay. I know he may, and we could use quotations and everything else. I don't know. My gut tells me he's not going to, but it's definitely a possibility.
And Peter, the only thing that I would say, obviously, when you go like 16 or 17 minutes without a shot on goal, you like being the opposing goaltender because you're not facing a lot of shots. But they really have to put more pressure on Tuukka Rask, because early in the game, when they did put pressure on him, he let in a couple goals. They were good goals, but he let in a couple. And the only way you could beat Boston is to load the shots on Rask and make them work.
Yeah, you gotta make things difficult. Like, that's really what has to be the underlying premise for the Blues tonight is you can't continue to do what you did in game 1, and you have to find ways to make things difficult, not only for Rask, because you found success there, do that again, but you got to make it difficult for the Bruins to get anything going, and you have to stop taking penalties. So it's really, 3 things. Make things difficult in the Bruins end, make things difficult on Rask when you have the puck, and don't take penalties, and see how far that gets you.
Yeah, the penalties are the key, because we know that Bruins power play is absolutely lethal, and if you give them 4 or 5 opportunities, they're going to make you pay. They're going to score at least a couple goals, and that could be the difference in the game. So, we'll see. It should be entertaining tonight. Hopefully, not 25 minutes of commercials like we saw in game 1. It was like how many little Dennis Leary vignettes and stage and the stage presentation of Little Nas X that we had to see before the actual game. I'm sorry. Start the game. The game started at 8:25, Russ. I think it was.
I know, and I will tell you, I was very surprised, and I hadn't been to TD Garden this year for a Bruins game. I'd been there for the Frozen Four. That they played so many wrestling clips. Like they played a large amount, besides the Ric Flair woo, which again started with
everybody.
Started with the Hurricanes in the 06 Cup. I remember writing about that for NHL.com and actually getting a quote from Ric Flair about that. It's interesting that they show so many. Like they showed Randy Savage, they showed Ric Flair. They really embraced that. They showed a lot of weird stuff. What I really had an issue with was the fact that they were showing clips like to get you excited about hockey, like Miracle and everything else. And they showed a clip from Mystery Alaska. And I was just like, you can't put Mystery Alaska in there when you're showing like these, you're showing Animal House, you're showing Belushi, Let's Do It. All this stuff, you cannot slip in Mystery Alaska.
The embarrassment of Russell Crowe's career in between Gladiator and LA Confidential, he does Mystery Alaska. Now, Peter, I just want to touch on this. It's not big news, but there's a website called sportslogos.net that always seems to get the new version of jerseys and emblems out there before the teams want to get them. And it's the 50th anniversary of for next season of the Canucks and the Sabres. Right. And this website released the 50th anniversary, what they think is going to be the 50th anniversary jersey of the Canucks. And from what I'm seeing here, they're going back to the old Orca jersey, not the.
I've not seen this.
Yeah. And I'm like, to me, that's the worst of their jerseys. I actually like the rink with the stick. I know Eck hates it.
Yeah.
I actually
love that one.
Yeah. I actually like the court jester with the big V.
Oh, that's the worst.
That's Johnny Canuck. Yeah, the Johnny Canuck one's good. That's what they really should have is Johnny Canuck. What's the sportsjerseys.com?
Sportslogos.net. We'll give them free.
I will say this. I'm okay with the Orca. That's fine. The V would be horrible. The fact that anybody likes it is beyond me. I don't know why anybody would.
Well, I when they redid it and they had the actual emblem with the skate, that was okay too.
You know what? You were probably that guy that wore that tuxedo T-shirt in high school too.
No, I was not Mike Damone from Fast Times at Ridgemont High. No. But okay, so all right, let's start with the chatter, because obviously everything is focused on the Stanley Cup final when we're talking about Boston and St. Louis, but the rest of the league are focusing on what's coming up, the draft, the unrestricted free agency on July 1st, getting players signed to contracts, draftees before July 1st, buyouts, which are going to be very interesting with the, cap space at a premium. Darren Drager started something yesterday with some comments on one of the Toronto shows regarding Mitch Marner. And I just, honestly, I'm not doubting his sources. I'm not doubting that he believes what he talked about. But this is basically what he said. He says he expects Mitch Marner's camp to take negotiations beyond July 1st. Says that he expects the Marner camp to visit teams starting during the 5-day negotiating window if a deal has not been agreed to with the Leafs, and basically courting an RFA offer sheet. Drager says that the Leafs will have to make an aggressive offer in the 10 plus 10.5 to 11 range. Okay. This is the thing. The highest paid winger in the NHL is Patrick Kane at $10.5 million. The second highest paid winger is Nikita Kucherov, and I believe Mark Stone equaled that with 9.5. Marner is a winger. He's not a center.
Although we got to be fair, Kucherov's 9.5 is more like 10.5 anyhow.
Agreed, because of Florida taxes, right, or lack thereof.
Yeah.
So and I think Nevada is the same, Russ. I think Nevada is a no tax state as well. So let's say that those contracts are at the equal of Patrick Kane.
Right.
Patrick Kane has won 3 Stanley Cups. He's won an MVP. I don't think now. percentage of cap, the $10.5 million salary when Kane signed it, it was about 12%, a little over 12% of the cap. 12% of the cap, with the cap going up to 83 million, is 12. I think it's like 12.2. There's no way that Mitch Marner is getting that on an 8-year deal, and I don't think there's any way that Mitch Marner is going to sign an 8-year deal with the Leafs. It's probably going to be 5 or 6 like Matthews. But Marner, in spite of the fact that he's been the leading scorer on that team for the last 2 years, is a winger. And I think the Leaf point of view, and maybe this is where this offer sheet threat and the money threat that they're talking about, I'm sure the Leafs are probably coming in right now saying we'll pay you, $9.75 or $10 million. And if Marner, if there's some wiggle room there and they have to go up to 10.25 or even 10.5 on an $83 million cap, I think the Leafs will do that. Where I think the Leafs are going to have a problem, Russ, is him asking for the equal or close to the equal of Matthews. And that's where I think the battle zone is. I'm fairly confident that if they don't have a deal by the draft, the Leafs will start to look to trade Marner.
I don't even think that. I don't
think they will.
I don't think.
I think they'll listen to trade.
I think they'll threaten.
Or
I don't think they will.
Take him to arbitration.
Right.
Well, you can you're obviously going to qualify him.
Yeah.
But I don't know. You can't go to ARB off the ELC. You can do it after.
Oh, right. You can do it after the. Yeah.
Right. He would have to sign a 1-year or a 2-year deal, sign a bridge, and then they could go to arbitration. But there's no realistic talk here of a bridge. It's going to be either an extended bridge, like a 5-year, 6-year deal, or the max deal. And I'm not saying they want to trade him. And the thing is, this is the point of view that's interesting here, Peter, is that Marner wants to play in Toronto. Right now, this whole exercise where I think Drager, I'm pretty sure that his source is from the Marner side, because obviously this threat is against the Leafs, and it's more leverage for the agent and the representatives than it is for the Leafs. Marner wants to stay in Toronto. It's clear that he does. He's been a Leaf fan his entire life. He's from the Toronto area. He's got advertising dollars coming in. I on one of the local Toronto radio stations, he's got some charity function in the middle of July. I have a feeling that charity function will dry up if he ends up signing an offer sheet someplace other than Toronto. So he's tied into Toronto, and Toronto is tied into him. There has to be some realism and some give and take here. And obviously 3.5 weeks out from, the negotiating window, this is not the time for flexibility. This is the time for taking a stand.
Yeah. He's got to work with the point that whatever unfolds doesn't turn into what William Nylander did. That's the end game.
Right.
Don't let it go to that, because there was no positive outcome from there. And both Kyle Dubas and William Nylander have to hope that things starting next season are very good, because otherwise there's going to be a lot of fingers pointed at both of them for letting it get to that, and the result that it isn't favorable to only favorable to one, really. And that would be Nylander, because if he starts off the same way again, doesn't produce, he's getting a whole bunch of money for doing nothing.
Well, that's why I think there's a possibility that he gets traded, because it won't. Right. Then it really won't. But
you'd probably be selling, you'd probably, well, he had good world championships, right? Like,
yeah, I don't
like you might be selling a little low, but there's other reasons to trade him than just you want to get rid of William Nylander.
Right.
The thing with Marner is you can't let that end game happen. You can't let a lot of bad feelings trickle out. Words that are maybe said behind closed doors coming through. You can't let this get into the season and the training camp, and neither can Dubas. You don't want that. And Mitch Marner may be a hometown boy. He may bleed blue through his childhood, but rest assured, Toronto fans will turn on him in a second.
Yeah,
if he pulls something weird like that. And and if you start pulling something weird like that, it's going to take you forever to earn it back.
And Russ, I know that there are a number of considerations sort of going down the road, but one of the things, because ideally, they want to get as short, the Marner camp will want to get as short a contract as possible, not a 2-year bridge, but a long-term deal, but short enough that he can be a UFA at, say, age 26 or 27 while he's in his prime. The problem with that, like a 5-year deal, if you go down the road 5 years, that means Nylander, Matthews, and Marner all become UFA at the same time. If they give Marner a 5-year deal, they would all be UFA the same year. I don't think that the Leafs want that to happen.
No, they probably don't. I don't think there'll be any RFA discussions, any offer sheet discussions with Marner. I don't think there'll be any, you better sign this or you're trading you discussions. I don't think there'll be any of that. I do think that they're going to say, hey, listen, we're coming up on offering Austin a contract too, and you guys are going to get a similar amount. So let's just hammer out the years because this is where it's at. This is what we could afford. If you want to win a Stanley Cup going forward, this is where it's going to be. And I think he'll fall in line with that. I think what will end up happening is Marner will sign a shorter term deal than Matthews. That's the way I see it.
So you think it'll be a 2-year bridge?
No. I just think like Matthews will get the 8-year max and Marner will
No. I mean, Matthews got the 5.
Sorry, that's right. Matthews got the 5. Sorry.
Yeah, so, and Marner
he'll get a 5 also. He will, or 4.
Well, I mean, see, okay, Peter. If Marner signs a 4-year deal, then they walk him right to the door of unrestricted free agency. Mm-hmm. I can't.
Okay. Yeah. There's a lot of balls in the air and how this could play out. Let's be logical about a couple things. Offer sheet, you're giving up 4 first-round picks.
Right.
If you're the Leafs, how many of those 4 first-round picks do you think you can turn into a Mitch Marner or near?
Well,
2, 3. Hang on. Yeah. So that's what you got to gauge, right? And then what happens if the team if you decide to do that and he accepts an offer sheet or something goes through? What happens is they've made some other moves. And then that you're forced to match the offer sheet. So say the offer sheet's $10.5 million, and it comes from a team who has cap space, has maybe signed a couple players, and you made some free agents. Said, well, chances are their picks are all 15 or lower.
Yeah,
for the next 4 years. Well, you have to weigh that. Then you have to also think like, okay, what is someone willing to pay to give up those 4 picks too? Does it make sense for a team to come in and do what the Flyers did with Shea Weber? Like, that's the other thing. How many GMs have the stones and the backing of ownership to do that and take that risk? It's a massive risk of that salary. And not because Mitch Marner isn't a good player, but because you've got to make sure you got all the other pieces in place too, or can get them.
If you look at the landscape of offer sheets, the teams that try to be too cute and try to get a division rival into trouble by offering an offer sheet, that can come back to bite you on the ass. So I don't know that, and that's awful risky to do that, because then you're doing it to put them in trouble, and then if they don't match it, they get your 4 first-round picks.
Yeah,
a team like Philadelphia, Russ, would seem to me to be the type of team that would do an offer sheet because they have a lot of cap space. There's an impetus there to win and win quickly. They have a core group there, but there are areas where they need to improve. So I could see them doing it, but that really is the whole crux of the situation. First round picks are more valuable now than they've ever been, and who in their right mind is going to give up for them to overpay somebody in free agency?
Right. So breaking some of this down. So like what Peter said, what's the odds of any of them becoming Marner? Like 30%.
Yeah.
Like that's, he's the upper echelon of what a top pick could be. So you look at that and you say, okay, that's one thing. But it's still the dearth of picks that says, hey, you know what? I mean, that's a lot of picks that could still help a franchise. Like
Mm-hmm.
you don't need to have one Marner. If you get 3 really great players out of it, you don't care about Marner anymore. So that's one thing.
Right.
I just think that I don't think it's that big a deal, Mike, if they walk him up to the door of unrestricted free agency, as you say, because they are the Toronto Maple Leafs. And in the end, they will always have options. They could always have money. They could always, now I get it. We know it's a cap world, but Marner will hit a brick wall at some point if he really thinks he will just, empty the pockets of the Leafs, because it's not going to happen. They're not going to do that again.
Right.
And they're not going to pay him more than Matthews. He knows that. His camp knows that. So my feeling is they should go for less years, fewer years than Matthews, to sort of bargain against his great years that they think are coming. And then they'll get the jump on the next contract before Matthews' contract is up. To me, that's the advantage I would want to gain out of his camp, and I would sign a deal fairly quick to make that happen.
Well, I think if they go short term, they'll want to go 2 or 3 years to have one more year of arbitration eligibility, one more year of arbitration RFA, or 2 years depending on how long. The 4-year I think is the worst case scenario for Toronto, and then if you go 5, 6, 7 years, it's
right. But I'm talking about it from the Marner side, like.
So you're saying he would rather bet on himself?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that's where he should be at right now, is go ahead and bet on yourself, and you really could cash in. It's not like he's going to be hurting for money, and this isn't going to set him up for life.
And on a 2-year or on a 2-year deal, I think you're talking probably in the 6 to 7 range on a 2-year deal.
No, but I don't think they'll do a 2-year. I don't think they'll want to do.
So that. You're talking 3-year, or are you talking 4?
No, I think 4. I really do think 4 is a good number.
I think 4 for Toronto would be an absolute non-starter.
I don't think Toronto's in a position of really having a non-starter. That's the whole thing.
Maybe
because Dubas is at a little bit of a disadvantage here,
right? Because
of what happened with Nylander, and like Peter said, it can't happen again. If it does happen again, then his job could be in jeopardy.
Well, let's widen the scope here and just spend a few minutes on this, because we know there are tons of RFAs this year. Rantanen, Aho, Kachuk. I mean, other than Marner. I look at the scenarios, and a guy like Aho, I think would be a prime candidate to be offer sheeted for one simple reason. Thomas Dundon, even though he's got tons of cap space, has an internal budget with that team, and he has the flexibility, but he's obstinate. And if somebody goes out and offers Sebastian Aho 7 years at $11 million, I think Dundon's going to say, "Have a nice day. I'll take the 4 first-round picks."
No, I don't think so.
Maybe I'm wrong. Well, the question is, which one of these RFAs out there do you think is most likely to get and accept an offer sheet based on where they are, where their team is, etc.? Because I think it's Aho. I think Aho makes the most sense. Is it Point? Is it Kachuk? Is it Rantanen? Who do you think?
I mean, I don't think any of them will, but just to play this game, I think it'll be Point, because I think they're in the biggest cap jam of any of the teams you mentioned. Dundon might be cheap, but at the end of the day, he's going to protect his asset. He could always trade him after that. Yeah. So
he'd have to wait a year to do it.
Yeah, whatever. So you wait a year and you trade Sebastian Aho. You don't think you'll get good value? Mm-hmm. Like, that's not an issue. You still protect the asset. Tampa, on the other hand, they would be forced to make deals to fit this new bloated salary of Braden Point in. So it'd be a lot harder for Tampa.
Right. Peter, just a couple updates, and I want to get your prediction or your guess. Robert Thomas will not play. He's not skating at the morning skate today. And Bob Bugner, ex-head coach of the Florida Panthers, has been hired as an assistant by the San Jose Sharks, so he returns to San Jose on Pete DeBoer's staff. So that's a good move for them. He was well-liked there, and that may set him up for another head coaching job a year or two down the road. So, Peter, I mean, first that question, which one do you think there's a possibility of an offer sheet? And then we can talk about Winnipeg.
Well, I think the offer sheet thing is getting hyped, and I'm sorry, this is probably not the answer you're looking for, Mike, is getting hyped more because we want to see it happen, because the dynamics of how teams are assigning value to players and when they're signing them at a younger age makes it more enticing to think of that. But I really don't think there is a team that wants to give up the amount of draft picks because they're too valuable for other things. They are a hard currency. And what we notice now, and Russ, you can speak to this, is that players are coming out so better prepared than they were even 20 years ago, which is still something that's close in mind. These guys are trained. They're ready to go. And we have more and more players stepping in earlier at deeper in the draft each year. And I think it's too big a risk. So it doesn't answer your question, Mike. I just think it's getting a little hyped on it. But I mean, I think if someone's going to offer sheet anyone and try and be a plunderer, they're going to go after Aho. Because of what Carolina's done. But you know what? Let's see what happens next season with the gate and what's going on in Carolina. And it might be something where people are like, hey, this team's, if they can stay competitive, keep up what they're doing for fan experience, it might not be so bad for Dundon on the revenue side if he's making money.
Well, I mean, I think it would make sense to pay your best player the most money, and he had a great year. But I just, Thomas Dundon defies logic sometimes, so that's why.
There's that.
Yeah, and you and Russ answered the question sort of the way I want. I think that this offer sheet stuff is leverage and bull crap. Yeah, it's a lot of bull crap. And I don't blame reporters from reporting it. Hell, I'm between now and July 1st. I'm sure I'll be mentioning Marner and offer sheets a lot because it's in the wind. But honestly, the last one was Ryan O'Reilly.
Yeah.
There's a reason for that. Teams do not want to give up first-round picks, especially when in a year and a half or 2 years, these first-round picks are in your lineup at an entry-level deal of $925,000 or less. So they can turn around. They're cheap additions to your roster in a cap world when dollar to dollar matters. So let's talk about Winnipeg.
I think the other thing is the other important thing is, and I'm going to bring up the thing you don't want to talk about. Nobody wants to talk about it. Why in the world would I do an offer sheet now when there's a potential work stoppage coming?
Sure.
Very good point.
Yes. Right. And everybody who's signing long-term contracts has to realize, the Leafs signed Austin Matthews to a 5-year deal.
Yeah.
Well, that contract may be 4.5 or 4 years. If there's a lockout that lasts a year or half a season, then you're not getting the bang for your buck. It's a contract that, it's limited in scope, and now you've limited even more with work stoppage.
Yeah. The work stoppage thing is, it really speaks to the idea of potentially the idea that if you're an owner, you're talking to your GM and you're saying, look, we are preparing for this eventuality with the NHL and contract things. Don't you go and do something stupid like an offer sheet where we give up draft picks and stuff when we've got all these battle lines. It sounds like collusion. But if every owner came back from a governor's meeting and said that because they know what's going on, that's strategy. That's being strategic about it. And it may look like collusion, but no, that's probably the biggest reason not to do an offer sheet.
Yeah, I think so. Look, yesterday, DeMar Smith for the NFL sent an email to all the players saying, save your money. There's probably going to be a work stoppage. Well, don't you think the owners at this point have a strategy for that too? Like you said, of course they do.
Yeah. And I'm sure the NHL has been storing up things that they would be willing to give up in a negotiation. You don't think that the participation in the Olympics is a negotiating point that they're going to, because the PA wanted to go to the Olympics and the owner said, no, we're not going to go to the Olympics. So that's on the table. It's like, okay, well, you want to go to the Olympics, we'll go to the Olympics. What are you going to give us in exchange? Because Because the owners are the ones taking all the risk when players go to the Olympics, like John Tavares blowing out his knee in Sochi in 2014. That's they're loaning their players out to these countries to play in the Olympics. But okay, Winnipeg, Peter. We've got some. I mean, they've got Kyle Connor, they've got Patrick Laine, RFA, the Trouba situation. I mean,
I'd said to you guys sort of before we got on show, there was last night or this morning. Basically, I've gotten, without saying it in terms of official word, because there's no official word, but I've been told that Jets fans can say goodbye to Jacob Trouba. Like it's officially unofficial that relationship has come to an end and he's gone. I don't think it's a surprise, but there's enough leakage coming out from people I trust explicitly in their relationships that it's inevitable. So let the games begin, because a 25-year-old right shot defenseman looking for a long-term deal, who can play long minutes, and had a career year in points. How often do these become available?
And he's got 1 year left, so you're going to get him probably at the qualifying offer of a little over $6 million, I think it is.
Yeah.
And then so you're getting not a free year, but you're getting now the whole thing is, and I mentioned this before, a couple in conversation with somebody else a couple days ago. Trouba really could screw over the Jets.
He could absolutely screw.
He could do an Erik Karlsson on the Jets and say, "I'm not signing with anybody." Period. And then Kevin Cheveldayoff is stuck trading an extended rental, and he'll get value. He'll get something like Ottawa got for Karlsson, but Trouba's not Karlsson.
No.
Ottawa got decent value. They got Tierney. They got Josh Norris, who they just signed yesterday. They got draft picks, but it's not Karlsson.
No.
You'll get something for Trouba, but to get the most for Trouba, either it's going to have to be a sign and trade, or it's going to be traded to somebody where he will sign.
Yeah,
and that's the
and working with that team prior to the trade,
right?
To get the deal parameters, which we've seen Kurt Overhart do.
Yes,
he has done that in
his playbook. That's the good news.
He has done that, but I will say in this instance, I could see Trouba saying exactly what Karlsson did, and going straight to UFA and telling the other team that he's going to, I'm still going to UFA, just so you know.
Right. And
I can see that happening.
And that mitigates what Cheveldayoff can get back. I mean, he may be able to get a prospect, a first round pick or something.
Yeah.
I mean, if they trade a Trouba with term, then the return will be phenomenal.
Yeah.
Right. I don't think they're going to get the opportunity to do that.
Right.
And I think, again, this could be one of those things that potentially plays out at the draft.
Yeah.
If a player is gone, like a team's player, say in the top 10 isn't there.
Yeah.
Right. Like there's like, it'll be very interesting to watch the Jets table after we get past, say, the third pick.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I think, that'll be a fascinating thing to see and how that fits together.
The interesting thing, Peter, is that the market for what version of Trouba you get will be completely different. If it's 1 year Trouba, I think you're going to have contenders, Tampa, maybe even Toronto if they could finagle the cap room. They'd be willing to give up certain prospects to get 1 year of Trouba to take a run. I mean, there'll be other teams too, but I'm just using those two. But there'll be at least a few others. If you're talking long-term Trouba, then I think you're talking about Buffalo and Philadelphia and Detroit and teams that want him, but locked in at a certain price. And the packages will be different. So this is going to be fascinating over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. Let's say we're in the draft and we know that Trouba's leaving.
Right.
And we know that he's, probably going UFA.
Right.
The other team's not going to have a great chance. Then it's going to be, like you said, all those teams, and they'll offer up a first-round pick because it's going to be a low-round first-round pick. Right. So, like the Bruins would offer their 30th or 31st, they would. St. Louis would offer their pick. All those teams that are that close would definitely give them a first-round pick. But again, it's the end of the first round pick. Right. They're not getting a top 10 pick for a guy with a year left. No one's going to do that.
Now, Peter, what would the perception be in Winnipeg if at the end of this, instead of trading him a few years ago after his RFA when he held out, keeping him 3 more years and then getting basically a pittance for him instead of.
Yeah, what would the feeling be? It'd be
what would the reaction? What would the reaction?
It'd be terrible. It'd be brutal. And there's still amongst the fans a bad feeling about when he did his holdout before his bridge deal. There's a bad feeling about him not wanting to sign long term and going to arbitration. There's still those fans who have this thing that not seeing the business for what it is, and that players have a window of opportunity to maximize their return on their contracts. And it's the psychological thing in Winnipeg of, we just want people to like us. And there's a feeling that he, enough rumor speculation that he doesn't like Winnipeg. He may not like Winnipeg, but you've got to move away from that as a fan and say, it's a business. This is a business negotiation. The Jets have to do what's right for him, and Jacob Trouba has every right to do what's right for him and what he wants in his career. He gets one career as a professional hockey player.
Yeah, I would say this, Peter. I think they knew when the last contract was signed that was the last contract Trouba would sign with them. I'm pretty sure they knew already at that point, and we're hoping that they could either win the Stanley Cup, get to the Stanley Cup, whatever. It hasn't happened yet. So now this offseason, they'll have to decide, can we get to the Stanley Cup? If we can, then they'll probably will have to let it ride. It is one of those things. If they feel like it's on the edge, then they will look to get some assets. But if they feel like they're going to get to the Cup, and we're talking about the same thing that Columbus was doing, and they're going to ride it out.
If they think that they have a chance at the Cup next year, then you would think that they would treat him as an own rental. But based on what Peter is saying, that's not going to happen. That they know that maybe he just doesn't want, he has no option really, because he went to arbitration last year. This year, it's basically the qualifying offer, and it's a 1 year deal to walk him to the door of the unrestricted free agency. So it's either 1 year in Winnipeg or 1 year someplace else.
Right, but it doesn't have to happen at the draft is my basic point here, because they could wait till camp, see what they have, see what they've picked up in the summer, see what Christian Vesalainen looks like. They might look at the team that they see on the ice and they say, you know what?
We'll just keep him.
We can't pull the plug on this.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm not sure how Trouba's camp would react to that. I mean,
they can't do anything about it.
They can't do anything about it. Right, exactly. They can't do anything about it, and it's either he's going to play. If he's going to play, if he tells the Jets that it's going to be UFA, I'm going to be UFA anywhere, then you might as well keep him, or wait until the deadline and see, because the return at the deadline might be the same that you get at the draft. It could be very. Okay. Russ, do you have access to the chat or?
No.
Oh, okay. One last thing then before we end the show. David Pagnotta, the fourth period, reported about Kessel, and I think we're fairly certain to hear that Kessel will be traded at some point before or during or slightly after the draft. We know that now from the reporting that I saw, Russ, without saying that he blocked the trade, Kessel blocked the trade in Minnesota. He essentially said, "Well, I'm not enthused about that," and they didn't even they didn't consummate the deal because it was a non-starter if Kessel wasn't willing to go.
And I think that's what we sort of figured out was it was sort of like a LeCavier situation.
Right.
He didn't want to go back to his hometown. A lot of players don't. I get it. Matter of fact, Charlie, we talked about Charlie Coyle yesterday, thinks that he did the best thing by not starting off that way. So now he's back in his hometown and he's happy. Kessel just probably doesn't want to do it. So they are going to trade him somewhere. We did talk about Arizona like 10 times at least.
Right.
It makes sense from a lot of different perspectives. It'll be all about the return. Like, what could they get for him? Because they're not looking for future assets.
No.
They're looking for future decently priced players that they can put in their lineup, and if they can get them for 2 or 3 years, hey, that's even better. But they have to put in usable parts.
And the name that popped up from Pagnotta, who apparently Pittsburgh has had interest in over the years, is Alex Galchenyuk.
Now, see, I saw David last night, and we chatted. He could have told me that. I'm gonna say something to him tonight.
Now, Galchenyuk is 1 year left at $4.9 million, and then he's a UFA. So that's sort of consistent with Peter. That's sort of consistent with the sort of the win now approach with Pittsburgh. They've got guys who have helped them win cups over the last few years, like Gensel, who they signed to long-term deals. Those deals are kicking in this summer. Kessel's under contract for 3 more years at 6.8. So they probably want to open up cap room down the road. And they would get it back a player who in Galchenyuk, who is capable of, I don't know if he can equal Kessel's offensive output, but he might come close. And then he would walk away, and then they would have the room to be able to have some flexibility. I mean, with Pittsburgh, it's all about, I think right now, it's about that 2 to 3 year window while they think Crosby and Malkin are still effective to take one last swing at it before they get too old and then they fall off and get the first pick in 6 or 7 years.
Yeah.
I mean, do you think Galchenyuk would be an adequate return for Kessel?
This is a tough one. I think you might need to add more, but the problem is now you've gone from Boston to Toronto to Pittsburgh, and you're now going on again, and there's no secret sort of who Phil Kessel is.
And you're now going on again, Toronto to Pittsburgh, and you're now going on again.
You hearing that?
And there's no secret sort of
you hearing that?
Kessel is.
Sorry, we're getting an echo here. Sorry,
I'm getting
an echo for a second. Sorry, we had an echo for a second. Continue. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So how's that?
That's good.
That was weird. So you're going on, and what is it with Phil Kessel, and should Pittsburgh be happy to offload the contract and get some space and change some dynamic, or should they be thinking about return? I think you have to probably measure your return based on the reasons you're trading him and what comes with him when you trade him and what's known about him and such like that. I don't think Phil Kessel's a bad guy. I just think there's a little bit of, I don't want to say reputation, but there's something that comes with him that's starting to. He doesn't
like, well, okay. He likes to be a compliment. I know this from him being in Toronto. Is he a good player? Yes. Is he somebody who plays well under pressure? Yes. Is he comfortable with being a leader? Not a chance. He doesn't want to be. Now in Pittsburgh, it's been a perfect scenario for the last 3 years where he's been a sort of a supplemental guy behind Crosby and Malkin. But at a certain point, Kessel's sort of aloofness annoys his teammates. He's supposedly well liked with teammates in Boston until he threatened to hold out, and was well liked in Toronto. But the fan bases, at least the fan base in Boston and Toronto, didn't really like him, and because of that sort of aloofness. They want these players to be sort of like physically and emotionally involved in their teams, and they after a while that gets him on the negative side. With Pittsburgh, I think it's more cap. I really think it's more cap. $6.8 million for 3 more years. Guy's 31 years old, and we know about he's been durable, but we know that there are teams out there that are worried that his lack of physical fitness will make him slip a lot quicker than other players. So, I mean, I think that's the concern. But I think that Arizona has always been the place I've sort of earmarked as a destination for him, because it just makes too much sense. I mean, Tocchet's there. It's a place where he can golf in the winter and have a sort of like off the, like no pressure to sort of hockey lifestyle, and still scores 30, 35 goals. And the Coyotes would be overjoyed because they're looking for consistent scoring and have been for the last few years. Couple questions here.
I was just going to say, I wouldn't do that deal. I wouldn't do Galchenyuk for Kessel. I would rather have, you know what, give me maybe Connor Garland, who I can now turn into, I can put him with Crosby, and he's got speed and goal scoring ability, started to show it with the Coyotes, and give me a defenseman too. And then I'll give you Phil Kessel. That's what I would be asking for, because then I would solve two problems on my roster. Just going Kessel for Galchenyuk doesn't really necessarily solve anything for me.
From the point of Arizona, or from the point of
Pittsburgh, because I can't really count on Galchenyuk as a goal scorer.
Yeah, but do you think you're going to get offense out of Connor Garland?
I do.
Okay.
I think similarly to Gensel and guys like that, I think you could plug him in and get offense out of him. I do. He's got a lot of speed. And if you saw, I think he played, like 20 games with them last year, and he did pretty well. I think he had 8 goals.
Yeah, a couple questions from the chat. One is probably I don't think is realistic. Could you see Kessel in St. Louis? St. Louis is fairly loaded, especially at forward. And
they could give Fabry. They could give a lot, but right. I don't see it.
Yeah, and Fabry now, Russ. Fabry, is he hurt again, or is he just an extra? Is he an extra forward?
Just an extra, I think.
Well, then he probably gets in for Robert Thomas then tonight.
Yeah.
The other question from Esmir. Do you think the New Jersey Devils make a move for a defenseman this offseason? Well, I mean, they have Butcher, they have Vatanen. Other than that, their defense, Russ, I don't think really is that great.
It's not that great, but I'd say it's just below NHL average. They have some guys. I mean, I will tell you this. For whatever reason, Damon Severson's offense was sort of muted,
right?
Like the last year, but you saw what he could do at the World Championships. I think they should sort of let him open it back up, and I think that would help him a lot. I do think they could be looking for a defenseman. I don't think they would go in the Carlson range, but it doesn't mean they won't make him an offer. I think they might make him an offer just to see if they could get in that, but they do need something. They might try and make a trade because they're going to get Jack Hughes. Maybe they could try and trade a young forward for a developing defenseman, because it's not like – I don't think the Devils are going to compete this year. Even with Hughes, I think they'll come up short unless they land some big free agent or two.
Yeah, I mean, Andy Green is making $5 million next year. Then he's a UFA and he's older. Steven Santini, Connor Carrick, Mirko Mueller.
That's it.
Yeah. One other question here from Brandon Horman. Regarding the Islanders Coliseum deal, wasn't this already known since last season? Apparently it came out in the last day or so that they're going to play half their games the next 2 years at the Coliseum.
It was not already known. And there's a lot going on as to when the project's going to start and when the project is going to finish. There's actually, I was talking to Ted Starkey about it, and he sort of made me aware of a lot of stuff. And so, yeah, there's an actual possible extension with the Coliseum in case this project gets delayed. Yeah. So that's already something that's out there too. So nothing has been really predetermined. I'm not shocked that it's working this way.
Yeah.
The only way it was going to go 100% Coliseum is if they had broken ground already, like they had that guarantee.
Right. Now, Peter, I'll give you the last one here on this one because it's Western Conference, and I think we know the answer here. But Arizona ownership change, possibly change of the city to Houston. I think that the fact that there's an ownership change again, and Barroway now is going to be a minority owner, is essentially him saying, "I've given up on getting a building in Arizona." And to me, it's only a matter of time before they end up going to some place like Houston, because Houston wouldn't require moving conferences, maybe not even moving divisions. I mean, how many times can you change ownership and use that shell game before you realize it's just not going to work there?
You can't. Like, you can't keep changing. It doesn't work. It might have worked had there not been an arena built out in the nether regions of suburban Phoenix.
Right.
If that arena had been built in where you could have drawn on people in a place that had a greater population density, you might have made it work. But we've been here, we've done this, we've done it over and over. And and saying that it doesn't work is no shot at the great people who come out and support the Coyotes out in Glendale. You're not the problem. You're the ones we love. You're fans of hockey. You're there. It's all the others who just don't identify with the sport and won't make that trip, won't participate. That's the problem. If you guys have an idea of how to find them and get them in the building and buying tickets and stuff, let's go. But that's the problem. And frankly, I don't know how long you bash your head against the wall. And are we just seeing are we just seeing the preview of what might have to happen in Sunrise too? I don't know.
Yeah, I think that the NHL has an out when it comes to Houston, because I think the reason that they've wanted to stay in Phoenix for so long is because they're a top 10 television market, and so is Houston. I think Houston's the fourth biggest population in the U.S. behind LA, Chicago, and New York. I'm pretty sure of that. So, that would be, and there's a building there, and it would just be, the ownership being able to either rent the building that the Rockets are playing in or build their own building. But I think eventually it's going to happen. But
I've lived in Houston, and I have cousins who still live there, and I've gone back there. Right now, they're fourth in the National League, the Astros, in attendance. Now, that's because they're a winner, and they're really good.
Right.
That's the key to Houston is how long will they put up with a team that's not a playoff contender?
Right.
That's going to be the big focus there. Like, they'll put up with a season or two and they'll go because it's nice and shiny and new, but they're going to have to turn them into what Arizona has not been able to do and turn them into a contender. And that's going to be the tricky part.
All right, guys, great show. Just for everybody watching, tomorrow we'll not be doing a show because it'll be a travel day for Russ, travel day for Eck.
Oh, sure. Blame it on me.
But we'll do a show on Friday. Russ will be in beautiful Buffalo for the NHL Draft Combine. He's hankering for some wings.
I've never used the word hankering ever.
Okay, I'll use it for you then. Okay, for Peter Tessier, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thank you for watching, and remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.